Hi folks, this is video number 90 and the title is Roadkilled Memories. This will be a collage of 8 or 9 experiences picking up roadkilled deer. That may sound like a grubby and mundane task, which it usually was, but like everything else in life, there are always exceptions to the rule. My first trip to the deer pit on Game Lands 57 was really memorable. I picked up a deer not too far from the house and drove out through Windy Valley to the access road. I used my key, went through the gate, and drove up to the pit, which was about a half mile up the mountain. It was a bright and sunny day as I pulled up and parked alongside the pit. I exited my truck and sort of slammed the door shut. Almost immediately it got dark and the sky got black. Around northeast Pennsylvania, it is a usual occurrence during the summer to see 2 or 3 turkey vultures floating on the updrafts here and there. What I did not notice when exiting the truck was that there were about 100 turkey vultures in the trees on the backside of the pit. They all took flight when I slammed the door. I guess you could call that an Alfred Hitchcock moment. I was just happy they didn't drop a load on me. Now I'll relate a story I'll call the Lake Paper Twins. East of Tunkhannock, traveling Route 6 east, after crossing over the Tunkhannock Creek and passing Deer Park Lumber, you would then cross Heitzman's Flats. After the flat and going uphill and around a sweeping right curve, there is an access road to a small print shop operation on the left side of the road. It is called Lake Paper. I had received a call about a roadkill in that area. I drove over and sure enough there was a large deer on the right side of the road. It was laying directly on the storm drain grate that directed runoff under the road and towards the creek. I loaded the deer and headed back to Tunkhannock. I got through town when Dallas, the Northeast Division office, called me on the radio. I had acknowledged that I was 10-6 and was leaving the house. That's code for available and on patrol. I heard, "Dallas to 53AB. I picked up the mic and responded with the usual 53AB to Dallas. Go ahead. The message was, "Don, we just got a call from someone hitting a deer in the area of Lake Paper Printing." I responded telling him I picked a deer up there about 20 minutes ago. Dallas told me the driver said he had just hit it about 5 minutes ago. With that, I responded that I would redirect and check it out. Upon arriving at the same location, lo and behold, there was a second deer. It looked to be a twin to the first one. It was lying on the drainage grid on the scattered pieces of hair left by the first one. The next roadkill was picked up over by the White Swan Inn near Lake Winola. This deer had been dead for a couple days. I lashed it to my rack with bungee cords and figured I would take it to Scottsville. The drive to the pit was about 35 miles versus 15 to Scottsville and my bear buddies. I traveled back Route 92 to Tunkhannock and drove through Tunkhannock and western Route 6 to Route 87, past the P&G plant and over the Mahoopany River Bridge, and turned off on the Scottsville Road. Traveling the dirt road, I turned off Scottsville Road onto Cemetery Road. This road was also dirt and not well traveled. I accessed the area where I fed the sow and cubs mentioned in a previous story from Cemetery Road. I reached the area and swung my Ram Charger around and backed up to the normal spot. I exited the truck and walked around the back to unload the deer. I almost panicked. There was no deer on the rack. I looked at my watch. It was a few minutes after 3. Oh no. Shift change at P&G was about to happen. Also, all 3 Tunkhannock schools were about to let out. There would be at least 25 school buses added to the mix, trying to maneuver out of town to get the kids home. All I could picture in my mind's eye was that bloated deer lying under the traffic light in the center of town. If that is where I find it, for sure I would be the headliner in the Tunkhannock Examiner the following day. I jumped back in the truck and turned right onto Cemetery Road. I drove to the T and turned right onto Scottsville Road. My sigh of relief was probably heard clear back in Mahoopany. There was the missing deer about 100 yards down the road. I loaded it up again and delivered it to my bear buddies. Next time I was in town, I bought some more bungee cords. The highest number of roadkill deer came from the area of Harding's Flats. Driving north from Dallas, you would go up and over Copper Mine Hill. The downgrade on the north side was about a mile or so long. At the bottom was, and is, a bridge. The bridge crosses Bowman's Creek. Nestled in the corner of land bordering Route 29 and the creek is a large roadside rest with plenty of parking and picnic tables and restrooms. It is a nice place for family outings. On the north side of the rest stop is a small used vehicle lot. From there, for about 3/4 of a mile, there is usually corn growing on both sides of the road. One night, Lou and I got a call to pick up multiple deer in that area. We arrived and turned on the four-way flashers and strobe light to warn oncoming traffic of our presence. We next walked up and down both sides of the road searching with flashlights. We found 5 deer. As we were loading up the last deer, we could hear a car coming from the Dallas direction. From the sound, it was obvious the driver was in a big hurry. That guy was flying. We heard him coming down the grade. All of a sudden we heard, eek! Bam! There was deer number 6. He hit her right at our end of the bridge and about 75 to 100 yards from us. We hurried over to check on the driver. He was shaken up, but otherwise okay. I can't say the same for his car. He was driving a nice 4-door Volvo. I figure he was probably doing about 100 miles an hour when he hit the brakes, maybe 70 to 80 when he hit the deer. The whole front end was driven back and wrapped around the front of the engine. You could not even see the remnants of the cooling fan. So now we had another dead deer and also a dead Volvo. We called Dallas on the radio asking Matt to contact and dispatch a tow truck to our location. We loaded up the deer and the driver went with the tow truck. We went to the pit. I received a call one evening from the guy who owned the used vehicle lot next to the roadside rest. He asked me to come down and pick up a dead deer at his place. Okay, I told him I'd be down in about 45 minutes. I went down and walked up and down both sides of the road for a few hundred yards on both sides and found no deer. If it was a fresh one, chances are that someone picked it up and took it home. Not finding a deer, I jumped in the truck and went home. The next day, the vehicle lot owner called me back. He wanted to know why I didn't take that deer. I told him I walked up and down both sides of the road and didn't see the deer. He said it wasn't along the road. It was on top of my RV. He never told me that. Besides, who would think to look on top of a 10-foot high vehicle for a roadkill deer in the dark? Apparently a couple bozos thought it would be funny to throw it up there. I had to go to work at the plant, so I called Dallas and requested they dispatch another officer to get the deer. This last Harding's Flats roadkill was a record setter. Back 30 years ago, which is about the time frame for most of these stories, P&G had a wood yard of about 30 acres or so, filled with logs brought in from the surrounding area. The P&G pulp mill debarked, chipped, and cooked the wood down into individual fibers that were bleached and pumped to the 6 paper machines that Lou worked on. They made parent rolls for conversion to Bounty, Charmin, Pampers, and Loves, where I worked full-time for 25 years. There are always lots of log trucks heading to Mahoopany from all directions. day and night. When a log truck hit a deer, a lot of times the deer would squirt out and up from the front tire and end up trapped between the back tandem or triplex set of tires and the load. It would just bounce there and the tire would peel the hide off that deer like an apple. I got another call about a roadkill at the roadside rest. I went there and found the record setter. There really wasn't much to pick up. The road had been well painted red and a few other colors, but the hide was still there. This poor deer was one of those that was peeled like an apple. My normal stride at that time was about 3 feet. I started at the back end of the deer, where I found a leg attached to the hide. As I walked along, there was another back leg, then a long strip of just fur, then an ear, then another ear, and a part of a front leg, and then another. That deer hide was 18 steps long. I think it would have been a state record for the longest deer. Who knows, maybe it would have made the Guinness Book, if they actually tracked such a thing. The next story happened on Tunnel Hill, which is about halfway between Factoryville and Nicholson on Route 11. I'm calling this story Slaughter on Tunnel Hill. It's called Tunnel Hill because there is a working train tunnel that cuts through it. I had to get a deer out of the tunnel once, too. Anyway, I'm not sure if Lou or Roy was with me on this one. I got a radio call from Dallas about multiple roadkills on Tunnel Hill. We went over there and the scene was almost unbelievable. There were either 4 or 6 ladies traveling in a mid-sized Pontiac Tempest 4-door car. It was their bowling night in Nicholson. I guess they were late. A group of 6 deer were in the middle of Route 11 at the base of the hill. The Pontiac drove right into all of them, killing all 6 deer at the same time. Somehow none of the ladies were injured, but like the Volvo, the Tempest 2 was a casualty. There were deer parts and car parts all over the place. We had to get that stuff off the road. There was a steep bank next to the highway. We just tossed the deer parts into the brush over the bank, which is about 20 feet down to a field. The deer rack was of no use. It would have been a trash bag detail, and we didn't have any. It was a mess. The last roadkill story is my favorite. Dallas called me at the house and asked me to pick up a deer over on Old State Road between Centermoreland and Falls. Lou's wife Karen was over having coffee with my wife. She told me she had never gone with Lou to pick up a deer, and she wanted to see what we did. I told her to jump in the truck. When we got over there, it was obvious the deer had been there a while, like maybe 4 or 5 days. It wasn't pretty. There were a number of houses close by, and removing the deer was preferable. I got out some gloves for us to use on this one. Karen grabbed the front legs, and I grabbed the back. On 3, we lifted that nasty deer. The back hip's dislocated, and then the elbow is dislocated. The same for Karen. The front shoulder's dislocated, and the knees dislocated. The legs all became 3 inches longer, and the body never moved. The only difference was that when the joints separated in the front legs, the lower leg skin, along with Karen's hands, slid up and over the hooves and off. I want to say Karen threw up, but at this point I'm not really sure. I know I wanted to. Karen never asked to go along again, and I don't blame her. Not all roadkills went to Scottsville or the pit. Over time, I created a list of elderly people I had the pleasure of meeting during the course of business. The folks were in their 70s and 80s and of meager means and income. Whenever I picked up a fresh roadkill that wasn't badly damaged, I would check my list and take the deer to the closest folks, even if it was 10 o'clock at night. They would be anxious about answering the door at that time of night, but after identifying myself and asking if they could use a deer, it suddenly became Christmas. Sometimes they would tell me they were not physically capable of handling a deer. My response was that all I needed was a trash bag and someone to hold a flashlight. I would dress, skin, and chunk the deer up for them, if that was acceptable. It always was. It would be a nearby family member or neighbor who could help them cut it up from there or take a box of pieces to a butcher the next day. I would hang the deer with a rope by the neck on a tree branch or barn beam. Through the use of my trusty old-timer pocket knife, I would go to work. I placed the back legs in the trash bag and opened up the deer. My helper would hold the bag open, and I would pull the entrails down, and they went right into the trash bag. No fuss and no mess. By flashlight, I proceeded to skin the deer, and then I'd carry the carcass into the house. The lady of the house would have either the kitchen table or a countertop cleared and paper covered. I placed the deer there and proceeded to chunk it at the joints with my old-timer 3-inch pocket knife. They took care of it from there. I'm not sure how many times I did that, but it was always happy work. They had meat for winter, and I was happy to be able to do it. Well, now you've got a little insight as to what happens to all those deer who aren't smart enough to look both ways before crossing the road. As always, folks, I wish everyone all the best.